Labs. Well, we're into November 2020, and there's certainly been a lot happening throughout the year, even if we've had to experience some of it while under lockdown, hasn't there? You might remember earlier in the year with our labs events, one of the big talking points was the Android versus Apple or Android versus iOS debates that we had. Now, if you haven't had a chance to hear the debates that we had about those, I'd highly recommend that you check back on your podcast platform or on YouTube and have a listen to some of the early live events that talked about the differences between Android and Apple. But today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the latest versions of those operating systems, iOS 14 and Android 11. Now, it's not going to be such a big, broad, open debate. We're hoping not to have to bring in security this time anyway. Hopefully we don't regret that decision. But we're going to let you know a little bit about some of the features of those two operating systems, iOS 14 and Android 11, how important they are. Well, we're going to discuss some of that a little bit later on. We're also going to be covering some quick tips and some tech news a little bit later in the show. And we're going to be chatting to Katrina Finn about how the role that technology has had in her life has helped her after a diagnosis of RP at an early age. So we're going to be listening to Katrina a little bit later in the show. Of course, throughout the show, we want to hear from you as well. If you have a question or a comment, or you want to just give us a bit of feedback, please do get in touch by emailing labs@ncbi.ie, or you can use the question and answer panel on the right if you're connecting through Microsoft Teams. So you can just go to the Q&A panel there, and we'll get to your questions hopefully throughout this show, and if not, we'll cover that in a future show. But first up today, we're continuing our regular Meet the Team piece. And today we're delighted to have technology trainer Miriam Kelly joining us on the show. You're very welcome, Miriam.
Thank you very much, Jude, and thank you for having me on the live event today, and hello to all your live event listeners.
Great to have you with us, Miriam. So tell us, first up, Miriam, if you would, how long have you been with NCBI and where are you based? Just give us an idea of that.
Well, Jude, I'm based in NCBI's head office, which is in Dublin, and I'm a member of the lab's technology team there working in the IT department. And I've been in NCBI now for 9 years. Okay,
so tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind, maybe any sort of training or your life before NCBI.
My life before NCBI, that's a good one, Jude. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. Before coming to NCBI, I had my own computer training company in Drogheda, and I had that for many years. Shall I share a little bit about how that came about?
Please, yeah.
Yeah. Well, after gaining the teacher's diploma in information technology, I began teaching adult education classes and delivering one-to-one training in computer applications. And this is back in the early 90s when it was relatively new, and I think the Windows system was 3.1 at the time. There's probably 20 operating systems since then. So I got the idea to set up a computer training business, and that was purely to give people the opportunity of being able to, train on, it was word processing and spreadsheets at that time. That's how basic it was back then. Yeah. So I did a Start Your Own Business course with the Louth County Enterprise Board. And during that course, I learned a lot, including market research, marketing, accounting and finance. But best of all, Jude, it gave me an opportunity to develop a good business plan, which I knew that I would need before I could basically present myself to the bank and look for a startup loan. So after completing that course with the Louth County Enterprise Board, my next step was to find a suitable business premises, which I did. And I wanted it ground level because I wanted it to be wheelchair accessible as well. I remember at the time calling up the Wheelchair Association and asking them, what height would a desk have to be for a wheelchair? Yeah. And that'll tell you now how much I knew about wheelchairs. And they were very intrigued as to what my call was about. So I told them. Anyway, I was all organised and off I went, and I made an arrangement to have an appointment with my bank manager for the startup loan. So on the day in question, I went in with my lovely business plan. I'd worked so hard on that business plan to present it to him. Anyway, I was my little chat with him, and as I was finishing up my presentation, he began shaking his head, and I was going like, oh no, please don't say no. And he was just shaking his head, and I was going like, what? And he goes, Miriam, that idea would never work. Now you've got to remember, this is back in the early days when there wasn't that many of these places. If there was certainly none, you know, in Drogheda, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I could see the potential of a computer training centre back then, so I wasn't going to be that easily dismissed.
Yeah.
Anyway, I left the bank, Jude, and I was feeling very rejected, and I was kind of loitering around outside, kind of wondering what I could do next. You know, should I go back in and say, you're wrong, you're wrong?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was standing there, and the next thing I see the bank manager walking out of the bank and walking off in the opposite direction. And what do you think I did? I snuck straight back into the bank and I asked to see a manager, just for a minute, please. And luckily, I was shown into an office where there was a female bank manager who I had never met before, sitting behind this large desk. And I thought, oh no. And I just wondered if she was going to be as dismissive, you know, as Mr. Bank Manager himself. Anyway, I quickly presented my idea and handed her my wonderful business plan, nervous that Mr. Bank Manager would kind of return at any minute, you know, call security and have me turfed out onto the street. But anyway, luckily she actually took it and read it, and I nervously waited, you know. So anyway, after reading it, she looked up and she asked me, how much would you need? And I just reiterated what was on the amount on the business plan, thinking that maybe she would ask me back and I'd have a further interview. And I thought, oh, this is going really well. Yeah. So I told her anyway. And so she just put her head down and she began writing. And the next thing, she tore off a sheet of paper of this great big wide book that she had. And she handed me a check for the full amount there and then. Wow. And she said, the very best of luck, Miriam. I couldn't believe it, you know. Yeah. Yeah. So I went straight back to the premises, signed the lease that day, ordered the computer equipment. It was from Dell and Gateway back in those days. Yeah. Cost a fortune. But I worked very hard at that business, Jude, and it became a very successful certified computer training centre. And we provided structured computer training courses. We also delivered bespoke training to companies and organisations throughout Ireland, but mainly in the northeast and Dublin.
Yeah, very interesting. It's interesting just hearing your story there, Miriam, because it kind of tells us quite a bit about you in that you've always had that kind of that desire to get into training. You've had the consideration for accessibility needs. You won't let obstacles get in your way. It's it's quite enlightening just hearing some of the background there. Tell us a little bit about your role now in NCBI, Miriam.
In NCBI now, well, the role that I would have I'm part of the wider team, obviously, in NCBI, and so my remit would be to work on what they call the working age group in Dublin City and County and surrounding counties. So the service users of the working age group would be everybody between 18 and 65. So this would incorporate the students, the people who are at home, the people who are at work. So I would be there providing I suppose to start with assistive technology assessments, really assessing the needs of the service users, where they're at and what they need to move forward, what they need to enable them, you know, to maybe contact friends and family from home, maybe to, you know, work with other softwares within the workplace. How are they going to manage in college? What will they need for there? So it's sort of it's a wonderful job in the sense that no 2 days are ever the same. So, you know yourself, you're constantly trying to, you know, present the very, very best solutions going forward for all of these. And of course, with technology, it's always changing, as you know yourself, Jude, you know, just when you there's no way of sitting back and getting comfortable with it. It's moving all the time.
And when your work is quite broad, as you said there's a lot involved in it already. So having the kind of new technologies coming up quite regularly, it certainly would keep you engaged, wouldn't it?
That's what I love about this job. I wouldn't say, that you could ever sit back, ever. Yeah. Not that would be my kind of personality. And I know most of the team, I work with an amazing team, and I know that they're all of the very same kind of personalities. We're computer geeks, I suppose, Jude. That's the polite word for us.
This is great, Miriam. Get your compliments in early before everybody else is interviewed. Get your compliments in early. Yeah, that's it. Great stuff. So tell us, is there anything particular you're working on at the moment?
At the moment, I'm currently providing, it's a countrywide virtual touch typing course. So I have a lot of people from around the country. So hello to any of you that are listening, and they'll tell you how I just keep the pressure on them. But my ambition, I think, and particularly for touch typing, I know people think, oh, this is just very basic, but actually, it's the one thing that I would encourage everybody with a visual impairment to do, is to learn to touch type, because you can type with your eyes closed, and it really opens so many opportunities when you need to work with a computer system, whether you're at work or at college or at home or whatever. I know there's a massive range now of mainstream technologies with accessibility available for our service users.
Excellent.
And our service users were probably the guinea pigs for a lot of this technology that the mainstream users are using,
Yes,
yeah, honestly. But I mean, thanks be to goodness that they have them, because they're wonderful. But anyway, back to the touch typing. I'm passionate that everybody with a vision impairment, and even people who are sighted, they should all have touch typing skills. It's just one of those skills. It's a great gift to give yourself.
Yeah. And there's quite a bit of take up in that, I believe. There's
quite a bit of take up. Yeah. I'm very popular, Jude. I'm very popular. You have to book me.
So if somebody wants to be
do
involved,
a touch typing course, get in touch with us.
If somebody's hearing about that now on the live event today and they want to be involved, there's probably going to be a little bit of a wait, is there? But how can they get in touch? How can they join that?
If they get in touch with the NCBI Labs team, they can all just forward on all the requests to me, and I'll deal with them and I'll get in touch with them. I don't have another date as yet. We've just started one there last week, so I don't have another date as yet. But yes, if there's a demand there, I'll absolutely run another one, because and provided my manager is going to spare me, to do this, because I only work, the part of the week, and so it takes a lot of time out of my day. But I'm so passionate about it, and it's such a good gift. I'm also kind of looking up some of the assistive typing software that's out there. There's not a lot, but anyway, it's not going to be as good as me, Jude,
I think on that note, Miriam, I think we'll leave it there. But thank you very much. Good to have you on the show, and hope that the typing classes continue to go really well, because they are such a key kind of enabler, a key way that somebody can access technology as well. So really good idea there. And thanks for joining us on the show today, Miriam.
You're welcome, and I look forward to the rest of the show, Jude. Thanks for having me again.
Good stuff. So if you're interested in joining one of those typing courses that Miriam is leading at the moment, as she said, they're quite popular, but you can get in touch with the labs team if you'd like to join in at some point. Very good. Now, moving on, are you team Android or are you team Apple? Well, either way, you'll be interested to hear about the latest updates to both operating systems. Now, we have our usual panel with us today. We've got Sean and JP and Daniel, who'll be getting involved in different parts of the show. But maybe just to start off with today, we can ask our panel a couple of questions on the iOS 14 release. Can you remind us when was iOS 14 actually released?
Sure. Hi, Jude. Yeah, so I can just remind everyone that iOS 14 was announced back in June this year at the Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, and became available for public download on Wednesday, 16th of September.
Okay, so what version of that? Because there's different versions, isn't there?
Correct.
You get iOS 14.
The latest version is iOS 14.1, and that was released just over a week ago, the 20th of October. I actually just installed it there last night.
Okay.
That's 14.1.
iOS 14.1. So
yes.
if I've got an iPhone, does it matter what iPhone I have? Am I automatically going to get iOS 14 now? Is my phone able for it?
Yeah. Well, obviously, it would depend on the iPhone you have. iOS 14 is compatible all iPhones from the iPhone 6S and later. So that actually includes the first generation iPhone SE. I know we have the second generation that was released, iPhone SE released this year, but it also includes the first generation iPhone. That actually happens to be all the iPhones that support iOS 13 as well. So it's an interesting point. So also worth pointing out though that there's certain features on iOS 14 that may not work on some of the older models of iPhone. So just to give you an example would be the new back tap feature that will only work on the iPhone 8 and onwards. So even though you might have the latest version of iOS 14 on your phone, there may be some features that may not work if it's an older iPhone that you have.
Okay, interesting. Now you mentioned the back tap feature there, and that's kind of one of the things that would have an accessibility aspect to it as well, of course. So can you talk us through some of the other accessibility?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I can go through some of the highlights. Yeah, exactly. Now, just kind of think back to last year. We had iOS 13 and we had several accessibility kind of improvements, enhancement there. I mean, we had things like with like accessibility, then it was moved into the settings, higher up in the settings app, so given a more kind of prominent position, so it was easier to find. We can think back, we had a new dark mode that appeared on all the Apple's native apps, so very helpful for people with glare sensitivity. We even had things like disability themes emojis, people for people with a white cane or with a guide dog. So kind of the bar was set quite high, I suppose. It was interesting to see how this stacked up. iOS 14 was going to stack up against that. I don't think it failed to disappoint. I think it's been quite good. So I mean, we mentioned backtap a moment ago. This is actually designed with accessibility in mind, but it can be useful for anyone really. So the idea is with backtap is that you can perform certain actions by a double or triple tap in the back of your phone. So these could be, for example, an accessibility feature like magnifier or voiceover, but also other actions like maybe it could be launching app switcher or even taking a screenshot. Think about some examples where it could be useful. Maybe someone with low vision, they could double tap the back of their phone to turn on magnifier. Maybe they'll triple tap it to turn on the flashlight. Maybe for someone with voiceover, double tap the back of the phone and we can enable voiceover, double tap it obviously to turn it off. But also worth mentioning with backtap, what we're finding a lot of people are finding useful is that the available options with backtap can be expanded when we consider that backtap can be set up to launch shortcuts on your iPhone too. So for example, apps such as maybe Sing AI or Be My Eyes could be launched with a double or a triple backtap on your phone. Yes. So it's worth pointing that out as well.
So tell me something with the backtap feature. Is there kind of a particular part of the back of the phone, or is it the whole back of the phone? Somebody doesn't have to locate
the back of the phone, and it's worth pointing out that if you have a protective case on the iPhone, people always say, listen, I have a case, it's not going to work, but it actually does work. So it's the back of the phone.
Interesting, double tap. Okay, so that's very good. Any other features that have kind of the accessibility side?
A couple of other features, some of the highlights, and I say there are several, so we won't go through them all, but some of the other features, notable ones were voiceover recognition. So obviously we're all very familiar with voiceover, the screen reader on your iPhone. It did receive a very big update in iOS 14 in the form of voiceover recognition. I suppose the idea with this is that you can get descriptions of images or screen elements on web pages and in apps that, for example, may not be as accessible as they could be. So there's a few different features in voiceover recognition that you can enable in the settings. So if you go into your settings and go into voiceover and then voiceover recognition, you can enable them there. And these will be image description. So it's actually a case where you get your phone to speak descriptions of images and apps and on the web. There's text recognition where your phone will speak descriptions of text and in images. And then there's also screen recognition. So all these can be enabled in the voiceover settings. So with screen recognition, you can have your phone automatically make apps more accessible, where it'll actually recognize items on the screen. So I know in a previous live event we were talking about how we could add a custom label with VoiceOver, but this actually is better again, because the screen recognition feature will actually identify it for you.
Excellent.
So, nice feature.
Yeah. And is that very effective? Is it very reliable?
Yeah, feedback has been good. One thing people have said is that maybe the sound that it makes, you have the option to change what's called a feedback style. So I can play a sound or I can speak, but they actually have the option as well to set it to do nothing. So if voiceover recognition is put into action, so to speak, rather than play a sound or have your phone speak to you, tell you it's working, you can just have it do nothing, and it'll just read out for example, the element on the screen.
Yeah.
So yeah, feedback has been quite good so far.
Yeah, very good. So that's all under the kind of the recognition aspect. Was there any other developments there with accessibility?
Another big one was the changes to the magnifier feature. So a lot of people are using magnifier on their iPhone, particularly people who have low vision would find it useful. It has been around a number of years, magnifier. I think it was released in iOS 10, but have been some significant changes to it this year. So for starters, the interface is being completely enhanced. So we have options for adjusting the brightness, contrast, and adding a filter to change what's being magnified to a color, so it becomes easier to see. It's possible now to rearrange all the controls to kind of customize it to your needs if you wish. It also includes a new multi-shot option as well, so you can take several pictures at a time and then you can place them all up against each other. So it could be useful if you're capturing, for example, different pages of a menu, that kind of thing, or a leaflet. And then the other thing with a magnifier this year is that it actually gets its own app. So you can actually add the magnifier app to the home screen if you want. So it's obviously just going to show how popular this feature is, that they've actually created an app for it. And anyone who wants to do that, they can just go into the app library, search for magnifier, and then drag it over onto, for example, the home screen or wherever they want to add it.
Excellent. So there's some great things from an accessibility point of view, but obviously it's not all just about accessibility. There's plenty of other features that will have an impact on how we use the phone. So any other features that are particularly worth mentioning?
Go to a few other features that were added. So the first thing I suppose to point out is that the iPhone, like the home screen on the iPhone in iOS 14, it does look very different to the previous versions. So really, to sum it up, it does offer a lot more kind of potential by kind of customizing, kind of customization. So for starters, big changes to the home screen came with the addition of widgets. So now we can add widgets to the home screen. See, they've been available on Android phones for a long time, but now Apple have brought them into iOS.
Apple are catching up a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think they were long awaited. So some people are enjoying these.
I shouldn't be starting anything here.
So yeah, nice feature. So just to remind anyone, the home screen widgets are like large kind of dynamic. They're like dynamic icons that display app data. Like it could be weather, headlines, that kind of thing, or even things like your step count if you're tracking your steps during the day. There's a new widget gallery, so you can actually go into your widget gallery and you can set what widgets you want on your home screen. And there's also a smart stack widget, which will show kind of relevant apps based on the time of day. So for example, you could have a widget displaying, for example, headlines during the day, and maybe at night you could turn to maybe a podcast that you're listening to, sometime in the evening or at night time. So it's a nice feature. I also mentioned earlier briefly the app library. A lot of people find this useful. So it gives you kind of a new a very kind of efficient way to organize all your apps. So whereas in the past you may have needed to scroll through a lot of pages on your iPhone to find an app that find an app that you want, now you're going to swipe all the way over to the right on your iPhone to access the app library. And here all your apps are automatically categorized into categories like entertainment, there's health and fitness, social, ones like for Facebook and so on, that is productivity and finance. As well as this, what you can do is App Library. You can scroll to all your installed apps that are listed in alphabetical order. So I mentioned, for example, the Magnifier app earlier. So if you go over to the App Library, you can scroll through a list in alphabetical order, or what you can go do is go to the search box at the top of the list and search for the app that you're looking for. So it's a really kind of nice way that Apple have managed to kind of clean up the iPhone's home screen.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me something. I know there's one or two other features as well, but just to think about what we can expect to be coming from the next version of iOS. We already know some of what to expect from that.
Yeah. Okay. So there is a very kind of exciting development happening at the moment. It's going to be iOS 14.2 is going to be released, I think, hopefully in the start of November. Now, released with this will be a new people detection feature, which will be available on the Magnifier app. So the people detection is coming to the Magnifier app. And how this is going to work is that it's going to use LiDAR to more or less let people determine, okay, well, how far they're away from another person. Now, important to note that this feature is only going to be available on LiDAR-equipped devices. And right now, this is the iPhone 12 Pro, the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and the iPhone, and actually the iPad Pro as well. This year's iPad 2020 iPad Pro. So it won't be available on all devices. Just a bit of information about LiDAR. I know we did briefly talk about it in a previous live event. It stands for Light Detection and Ranging. Essentially, it's a way of measuring distances. So it throws out, your camera will throw out light in the form of like laser pulses at an object, and it tracks how long it takes for those pulses to come back. And doing this, it works out the distance, between two objects. It's actually the technology behind devices like the robot vacuum, even some self-driving cars that have been developed too. It can work indoors and outdoors, but it doesn't work in pitch darkness.
Right.
So the idea with this, that people detection feature, it features in the Magnifier app. Let someone be aware of the distance between themselves and another person. So, think about use cases like this. So maybe if someone wants to know if another person's approaching them, if they're out walking, if maybe someone's on a train or a bus, wants to see if there's an empty seats available, or even things like following kind of social distance requirements, right now. And, if they're in a checkout line at a shop, make sure they're maintaining kind of social distancing requirements there.
Very good. So, okay.
Really nice feature.
And just a question that's come in there is the App Library feature available on the iPhone 7 with iOS 14.1 already installed?
It will be. If it's iOS 14, the App Library is there, and all their apps will be categorized into those categories I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so it is there.
Very good. So you can just sort of swipe all the way to the right.
All the way to the right, yeah, and there's the App Library, yeah.
Perfect.
Another handy feature, just to mention there, is in the control center in your settings, you can switch on the magnifier. So when your phone is locked and you just swipe up, you swipe up now to access the torch and all that, you can actually now access the magnifier directly from there. So it's a really handy shortcut to have as well. Quite handy to have maybe on the 6S and the 7s, I suppose, without the back tap feature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good.
Definitely.
Excellent. So a lot of interesting things happening with iOS 14. Would there be any kind of, when we're talking about the latest in Apple devices and even in the operating systems and things like that, is there any particular kind of limitations that people might just want to keep in mind if they're thinking, oh, this all sounds great, I'm going for that?
Certainly with the kind of coming out with LiDAR, it's only going to be available on the iPhone 12 Pro, let's say 12 Pro Max, and this year's iPad Pro. So that is a big limitation. But I think it will be an interesting addition coming to iOS 14. But yeah, there are limitations there, so yeah.
And hardware-wise, there can be kind of limitations at times as well, can't there? Because repair and things like that can be quite.
Exactly. Yeah. Sean is actually we were looking to talk about that earlier actually about the limitations there, Sean. So
the like things like changing parts in the phone, they're actually digitally signed to the phone itself. So if you crack the screen and you put a new screen on it, things wouldn't work correctly, or if the camera was replaced, the camera wouldn't work correctly. You have to go to an Apple shop to get these things fixed, and to get the new parts signed to the motherboard within the phone, or else it won't work correctly. Yeah. I've even seen people taking apart 2 brand new iPhone 12s and swapping official parts, and it still won't work because each part is digitally signed to that particular phone. So that's kind of Apple, like they would prefer if all repairs were done in their own shops, and then there's the right to repair movement to people want to repair their own device. So that's always up for debate. But just be aware, if a part is broken, you can't bring the new iPhone 12 to like one of the shops, like it may be a local shop. It has to be an official Apple shop.
Yeah, very good. So it's there's quite a lot in that. When we're talking about iOS 14 and Apple devices, we know they're excellent, and a lot of the features are so good. But it's always useful just to have all the information if it is something somebody's going to make a big investment on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. So let's have a think about the other side of the debate then, I suppose.
Finally.
Not that we're too interested in opening up the argument again, but let's have a think about Android 11. Now, I believe Android 11 had an awful lot of those features already, didn't they?
I think those features are there since the first version of Android, because
So when we're talking about Android 11, we're talking about many iterations past that. But has Android 11 actually been released yet?
Android 11's released since early September on its own Pixel phones. Okay. So the Google Pixel phone will always get the first release of a new version of the operating system. Other manufacturers, then it's up to themselves when they port the operating system onto their own hardware, or even if they'll do it at all. Some phones, they drop support after a couple of operating systems and it just leaves it on whatever it is. So there's always been a research. So
I could have an Android phone, and it might even be a fairly new Android phone, but I won't necessarily get through to Android 11.
No, what the manufacturer might guarantee you get support and operating on certain operating systems. So they might bring you as far as 10, and then they'll drop support for that. And then under new devices, if it's a brand new one and still on 10, that'll probably go to 11. But it's entirely up to the manufacturers. That's out of Google and Android's hands.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of quite important as well. So if somebody is going to get an Android device, it's useful to know which operating system, particularly when we're thinking about some of the new features and accessibility improvements that are with Android 11. Can you talk us through one or two of those new features?
Yeah, accessibility wise, new features, like I know we spoke about Lookout before, and that's comparative to Seeing AI. So it's an artificial intelligence scanner which is going to use OCR to read documents, and it can describe situations in rooms and things like that. But it's all at early stages.
Yes.
And that actually works internally on the phone rather than being sent over to a cloud computer like Seeing AI would do. So it's all done internally on the phone for people who are concerned about that. Okay. It's always good to use these things and give feedback, like we always say, and I think Lookout is a bit rough around the edges at the minute and can certainly be improved with feedback.
Yeah, okay. And anything else with the Android 11 that we can expect?
Yeah, they're kind of pushing the tactile braille keyboards, so as an input method, so you can activate that on the phones. They've had things like that in the past, but they're claiming now this one's better, so we will have to try that there. And not in terms of visual accessibility, but to have added live captioning. So for people with hearing loss and they can't hear what's in a video, it will automatically put captions into that video. And to save with Live Transcribe, as you speak, you can open the Live Transcribe app, which will put into text what you're saying. And we were hoping in the past that maybe that would be becoming useful for people who use braille devices connected to their phones.
Yeah.
But the refresh rate, like the as people talk, the braille has to refresh a lot, so it's very hard to keep up with the conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not beyond the realms if you read fast. But I mean, that's available, and it could come in useful for us in the future. And another major release is, they've probably been working on this 4 or 5 years, is voice access. Now that's for people who don't have they might have use of their limbs. They could be paralyzed, or for whatever reason, they could have tremors, and they can't touch the screen. Every part of the screen or every location on an app is giving a number, and you can say that number, and it's pressing that part of the screen. So while that's not entirely useful for us, it's worth knowing in case you have any friends out there who maybe had an accident and maybe they haven't got use of certain limbs, and to let them know that you can access all parts of a phone now with voice access with speech.
Yeah, very good. And I think it's useful to know sometimes as well, even if it's not something that individually a person might use themselves, to know that the manufacturers are actually really delving into some of these things, trying to find ways around things that maybe we might have thought, oh, well, there's not another way to do that. It's interesting anytime we see one of these developments. Absolutely,
because there's a sound amplifier also. I know iPhone have something similar. So you can place it in the middle of a room if you have hearing difficulties, and it's acting as a room listener. So even if you're at a meeting, you could put it in the middle of the meeting and the sound is going to go to like your AirPods or your wireless earphones, and it kind of acts a bit like a hearing aid or a room listener. So someone with dual sensory loss, that is a very, very useful feature on both devices.
Yeah, very good. So just one final question just about the Android 11. Is that going to work if I've got like a 5G phone? There's not going to be any issues or anything with that, is there?
No. Android 11 will work with 5G. So that's depending on if your phone has 5G or not.
Okay.
But it also depends if your area has 5G. But the operating system is built to work with 5G devices.
Yeah. Very good. So plenty of good new features on both iOS and Android, and we certainly want to encourage people, if you've already started using these operating systems and you've got any feedback to give us, we'd love to hear from you. So please do get in touch. You can use the question and answer panel on the right hand side if the show is ongoing. But either way, we'd love to hear from you, and you can email us at labs@ncbi.ie if you've got access to email as well. So very good, interesting piece and interesting news to hear about. So now we're going to move on with the show a little bit, and just before we go into our Seeing It Your Way piece this week, we're actually just going to take a couple of minutes to talk about some quick tips. Now, we've done this before to some degree on some of our live events, but we're going to be bringing this in maybe a little bit more regularly on our future shows. And the idea is that we're just going to share sort of little snippets of information that you might find useful, maybe things that we don't have included in the bigger pieces on the show, maybe just very short little tips. So just to give you a taste of how that's going to work, maybe we can go back to Sean first of all for our first tip of the week. What's your first tip of the week, Sean?
Well, I know a lot of people know this already, but I know a few people I was speaking in the past weren't aware of this. It's just basically a feature that will copy to the clipboard the last thing that VoiceOver has said. So the last element you've swiped to and whatever's read last, if we take 3 fingers and tap 4 times, that's copied to the clipboard. And then the next time we navigate to an edit box and we turn the rotor to edit, we can swipe up to paste and double tap, and it will paste that bit of information from the clipboard into that edit field. Excellent. And the only caveat with that is some people will have Zoom turned on as well as VoiceOver, and because Zoom shares a lot of the same shortcuts, if Zoom is turned on, you'd have to tap 3 fingers 5 times. So it won't affect everyone, but it definitely affects us in demonstrations because we'd often have both features turned on at the same time. So it's normally 3 fingers 4 times to copy the last thing that's said by VoiceOver to the clipboard.
That's a great tip. Okay, thanks, Sean. Very good. And I believe, Daniel, you have a bit of news for us as well. It's not quite the same sort of quick tip as such, but a bit of interesting news as well.
Yeah, interesting news. Just I suppose while the guys were talking earlier about the new iOS 14 and new Android 11 coming on stream, that Microsoft have released their second half of 2020, their update. And there was rumours going around that the control panel had got the axe, but not quite. It's the system information panel that's in the control panel has now got the axe. I guess it's started, I suppose, way back in Windows 8. Microsoft have been gradually chipping away at the traditional control panel that we're probably all familiar with since going back to Windows 95. So it is gradually being chipped away, but there was a rumour going around the web that control panel had totally got the axe. It hasn't, but I suppose it's a sign of things to come in that regard. Now, Windows 10 H2, they're calling it, they've changed it. They used to go with 4-digit number based on the year and the month that the Windows 10 update came in. Now they're just switching that over. They're going to have, you'll have 2.0 obviously for 2020, H2 being the second half of 2020. So they're continuing with their biannually major updates. And I suppose the way Microsoft plan these updates is just one major update every year, and then kind of a culmination update, that follows that usually. And the version 2.004, which would have been April 2004, had real big improvements for accessibility features. So I suppose it's like the budget update from the government. There's no goodies being handed out in this release. No changes as such really to anything in the accessibility center. The only thing that might interest some people is the refresh rate can be altered on your graphics card in the control panel. That might be of interest to somebody. Up and that will probably ask your machine to consume a little bit more power, but the trade-off then is getting smoother video and things like that. So that just might be of an interest to a couple of people out there. But as I say, most of the things that are in this update are security updates, little bug fixes. There's no real goodies for the accessibility features this time around. So we'll hold off till 2021.
Well, cheers for keeping us updated with that as well, because it's useful to know if we're kind of expecting new releases from time to time. Even if there's not something of interest there, it's good for us to know what has been included and what hasn't. So appreciate that. So thanks very much to Sean and Daniel and JP for those sections there. And obviously we're going to be hearing more quick tips from the team next week. And if you have any specific platform that you'd like to hear some quick tips for, then please do, again, get in touch. Let us know which platforms you're using, what you'd like to hear a bit more information about, and we'll try and bring you the tips that'll be most useful to you. But now we're going to move on to our Seeing It Your Way piece. And this week we're going to hear from someone who has experienced how technology has been able to help her through education, through employment, and in her social life as well. This week's guest is Patrina Finn. So let's listen to this week's Seeing It Your Way. So this week we're delighted to have Patrina Finn with us for our Seeing It Your Way piece. You're very welcome, Patrina.
Thank you very much, Jude.
So Patrina, maybe you can just give us a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Right, well, I'm Patrina and I'm 52 years of age now, and I was diagnosed with RP when I was 6 years of age. At the time, my parents were told I'd be blind by the time I was 20. So I was sent to St Mary's School for Visually Impaired Girls in Merrion when I was 10, and I went and completed my Leaving Cert there. When I was in school in Dublin, I was a boarder, and I went home at weekends. The main thing I learned there was Braille. So I went to college in London then when I was 19. And I studied physiotherapy, and I worked in Liverpool for about 2 years, and I came home then, and then I started working in Louth. I got a permanent job there, and I stayed in that particular job in different roles with the St John of God's for about 26 years. I worked full time up till, we'd say, my second child was born, and then I worked like a 4-day week. So I've always worked until last year. I always worked. My eyesight would have got worse sort of gradually, but I would have noticed it maybe if I went somewhere that I hadn't been for maybe a year or two, and I go, oh God, I used to be able to see that, and sort of found out then I was starting to get, sort of not doing things like I would have had night blindness, and when the kids were small, I wouldn't have gone out at night with the kids, but I would have just worked my life around that, so sort of didn't really realise how my eyesight was impacting me, till sort of one day I stopped and looked. I had a significant deterioration in 2005 following surgery. Now it was routine surgery, but just a couple of weeks later I had a significant deterioration, which was quite traumatic, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So I had, my eyesight obviously must have been getting a little bit worse, because I had organised to go down to the Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind to learn cane training for a week. So I went off and I did that, but I still sort of was in a bit of denial about my eyesight, sort of. I came home after, now bear in mind we had 3 young children, and I went off for a week's holiday down to Cork, basically, sort of, and I came home and I promptly folded the stick up and put it in my handbag, and that's where it stayed for a little while, much to my husband's disgust, sort of. But then I started, sort of taking it out, and I wouldn't use it on the street. I wouldn't use it in familiar surroundings, we'd say, like my own town, but I'd use it in Dublin, no bother, that way.
Yes,
so, I adapted to it. I went down in the March. I really didn't use the cane, and I didn't find it that useful, because I think I thought I'd use the cane and everything would be magically rosy in the garden, sort of. It wasn't a magic wand, sort of, that I thought it was going to be. So then I decided to get a guide dog, and I got a guide dog fairly quickly afterwards. So then that was the turning point. I mean, I just thought the guide dog was just absolutely fabulous. I couldn't get over how much freedom I had with the guide dog, how easy, how confident I felt walking, how, I didn't realise, my posture even, and as a physiotherapist, you think I would have known, but my posture had gone right down, sort of when I was using cane or walking without the cane, because I was so scared of falling or whatever. To be able to get out independently on my own and stomp the ground, and what I had to say and what I didn't have to say, and by the time I came home it was all out in my system, so it was grand.
Oh, very good. So that's really interesting. So you were using, at this stage, the cane, you had the guide dog. Now, just bring us up to date a little bit more now. Last year, I believe you had another bit of a kind of a setback.
Yes, I did. So then it's sort of, my eyesight would have stayed stable for gradually went back to sort of gradual sort of, but last year, well, actually 2018 we had the fla here in Drogheda, and then 2019 we had the fla here in Drogheda as well. But I noticed a huge difference in my eyesight and how I was able to manage to get around in crowds and, recognise people and sort of stuff like that. I could see a huge difference in it. And in 2018, my consultant had said, look, your eyesight is getting worse. But, and he said, did you ever think of taking early retirement? And I was like going, is he for real? Sort of, you have a mortgage and that, as well, So I sort of, but I mean, in hindsight, I stuck my head in the sand, sort of, and so in 2019, the fla was on, and it's, oh my God, my eyesight really has got worse, and then I was finding work quite difficult. I travelled a lot with work, and I travelled a lot. I did a lot of home visits. I did a lot of things. Now, there was reasonable accommodation put in place for me, and my colleagues in that were very mindful of my visual impairment, and we'd tactics ourselves, we'll put it that way, sort of that, sort of we would have used in the workplace. And but I just found it was just getting too difficult, and I was up with the consultant again. He mentioned retiring, by this time I'd done my homework, sort of from a financial point of view, from my pension, and I decided that it was just too dangerous for me to work, really. So I took early retirement on sick grounds.
So tell us a bit then, just kind of moving towards technology. Have you always been a bit of a techie? Have you got a kind of a bit of...
At all. Not
right,
at all,
okay.
dude. Necessity is the mother of invention. I only learned a bit I need to use, and that would be that. Sort of got dragged and kicking into I used to lecture in college, and it took me, the way years ago, maybe in the 90s, you'd have acetates that you'd put up in a projector, and it took me years to get past that, and I came in one day all delighted with myself with a floppy disk, and your man said, oh God, I haven't seen one. It's usually, the memory sticks weak.
Yeah.
I was going like, oh my God.
Technology and you wouldn't have been the best of friends.
No. And I learned it for work, and sort of like used it as much as whatever. What I did do though, in regards to technology, when my eyesight in about 2005, I went off and I did, because I hadn't the ICDL done at all. I did it's called the ECDL at the time. I did the ECDL up in Finglas with a girl called Paula Darrington and Gus Darrington, and I basically learned it through JAWS,
Yes.
So even though I could still see the screen and use the screen, I learned how to use the screen reader, and it was, if I had any advice for anybody, that would be that. Go and get your technology, sort of before you actually are forced to have to use it, so that you can become familiar with it. So that was a great course. That was brilliant. I went off and did like a postgrad after doing that, and I wouldn't have been able to do my postgrad without having that level of technology, sort of. So that was the first bit of technology. The second bit of technology, which I found brilliant again in 2005, was the speech on your phone for reading texts. Oh my God, that was like a door opened into happiness for me, sort of, because what was happening was now I had the old Nokia phone, sort of going back years ago, when it was like the screen was like pages, sort of like, and I used to be there trying to read, sort of the script, and I couldn't read the text, and if somebody sent me a joke, I'd lose the joke halfway through because I'd just get tired reading, so the whole thing would. So I used to be often then just saying to my daughter, who was 12 at the time, here, just read that text, will you? So I got the speech on. At the time, you had to go and, like, it's not like nowadays that it's inbuilt in the phone. You had to go and get put specially on a particular phone. So I went off and did all that, and God, it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, like, sort of being able to read text, send texts, sort of, so the voiceover on the phone, and now I have an iPhone with the voiceover on it, and it's just, I actually couldn't be without it, to be honest with you, So that's the two, and again, I used them before I read, again, like the JAWS, I learned how to use it before I really had to use it, that way.
Which sort of stood you in good stead then.
Oh because then when I actually did, it was fine. I wasn't having to learn a new skill, so so that
Absolutely.
was that.
It's incredible, actually, just as you're talking there, just to think of like the fact that you were using JAWS quite a bit, you were using the speech on mobile phones quite a bit, and this is going back quite a way. So even though a lot of the technology we have now has refined that a lot, and there's of course newer things as well, those are still massive parts of accessible technology, and they've been there for a good while.
Sort of, because I actually remember being up in the National Council of the Blind around 2006 or 7, and with somebody who was in the technology department, and there was a student with her, and she was saying, what does the speech mean to you? And I was saying, it's opened a whole new world, sort of, it's just, you know, and brought me up to speed with me peers, you know, sort of like, I mean, because everybody else was texting, so I had to learn it. I should be able to text, you know, sort of, and that's how, and I mean, I have a group of friends, and the only way we sort of communicate is through WhatsApp, you know, sort of texting one another. So I'd be lost, you know, if I didn't have that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you know, the social implications of it. It's not even just the educational or the independence. It's a social sort of thing as well, you know.
Yeah. Obviously, with something like a smartphone now, just the fact that it can talk to you is a big part of it. But has there been any particular apps that you've found very useful? Anything that you've tried that's helped you?
Be My Eyes app is great. I downloaded that there last year. I only found out about it like around this time last year. I only found out about it, the Be My Eyes app. So that's where there's volunteers on the other end of a phone that, like, if you ring up, you can ask them a certain question or whatever. So for instance, the other day I have, because I take medication every day, but one of the pallets, is that what you call it? You know, the blister packs had fallen out of the box into the bag, and I didn't know I had to take one of one and two of another, so I didn't know which one it was. Now I have a magnifier, and I could have went downstairs, got my magnifier and scrutinised the thing, and after a few minutes found out which one it was. But I just said to myself, oh God, do you know what? I'll do that Be My Eyes. So I rang her. I held up the phone. I held up the blister pack in front of the phone so she could read, you know, the back of the blister pack. And I said, could you tell me what that medication is? And she said, it's X, Y, and Z. And I said, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. And like within a matter of seconds, I didn't even have to get me bum off the bed, you know, sort of thing. So another time I dropped my phone and it was on silent. Oh no, it must have been dead actually, because it wasn't vibrating either. I tried to ring it from my landline, couldn't find it because, you know, sort of, and I knew it was up in the bedroom. Do you know, I just knew it was there. So I got my iPad and I rang the Be My Eyes and I went around the room sort of strategically left to right. And then she said, just hoping that there was no filth on the floor or something, that it was sort of semi-clean, you know, and, you know, sort of, and it went round the room and then she said, stop. And I went, stop. And she said, it's actually underneath that bag, you know, sort of. And it had slid underneath, you know, underneath. I had a bag of clothes sitting there and it slid underneath there. So, funny story about the Be My Eyes is Chantel up in the National Council for the Blind told me about it. And I said, oh God, when I go home and download that. Oh, that sounds a great app. And I left the National Council for the Blind. I went up to Drumcondra and was standing waiting on my bus. And this girl came and said to me, what bus number are you waiting on? And I said, no, I'm waiting on a coach, you know. And she said, did you ever hear of the Be My Eyes app? She said, I'm a volunteer, she said. And I said, you wouldn't believe it. I only heard about it today. And so that was mad. So then I went home and I was telling my daughter, who's 28, and she said, oh, I'll sign up for that. So she signed up. As she was signing up as a volunteer, I was signing up as a user, do you know? And they must have sent her an email and said it'll be a month before you get a call or whatever. And so she just thought, that's grand. The next morning she came down and she said, oh my God, man. She said, it's mad. She said, this girl rang me from London. She said, I got my first call with Be My Eyes. This girl was in Euston Station in London and was saying, what platform is the train going to? Essex, we'd say, or whatever. And she was holding up her phone and my daughter said, just move over to the right slightly. And she said, it's on platform 4. And the one said, thanks very much. And off she went. So mad. It's brilliant app. So that's a good one. I'm just trying to look to see what else I have on my phone here. I joined the NCBI library last week or the week before. And oh my God, I am in my element. My next purchase in life is going to be, you know, those bone, one of the lads was telling me about them, the bone conductors earphones you put behind your ears, so that at least you can still hear here and you can hear that, you know. So they're going to be my next purchase.
Very good.
And then recently, as in last week, I only brought an Amazon Fire Stick, which has audio description on a lot of, audio description is absolutely, mine even watch, like, do you know new DVDs and that come out, they all have audio description, and like if we're watching a film together, we'd have mine even would put the audio description on. I don't have to be there, do you know, that way sort of.
Yeah.
They like it so much, you know. It's brilliant because like you miss so much, you know, sort of nuances, you know, sort of. When somebody comes into the room on the telly and you're going, who's that? You know, they're going, shh, everybody else, shh, you're missing the point, man. You know, sort of. And what else? And I've gone to audio descriptive plays, we'd say, like in the Gaiety or in the what's that one called? The Board Gosh. I went to Les Mis, audio described, and the Board Gosh there last year. Fantastic. You know, sort of. We went over to Hamilton in London. We sat in the door, and I seen that audio described. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So.
It's really interesting just hearing from you, Patrina. Just as you said earlier, you weren't really into technology, and yet at this point, technology is kind of all pervasive, and it's doing so much for you. Yeah,
like, you know, sort of. As I said, I'd be selective, you know, sort of in what I only use what I need to use, you know, sort of thing. But I wouldn't have. Even the thing Siri on your phone, like that's just brilliant as well, you know, sort of. So technology, but it's brilliant. Even like I have to purchase a weighing scales, like a kitchen weighing scales, talking kitchen weighing scales. But I have a bathroom talking weighing scales, and that's great. You know, I can weigh myself in the privacy of my bathroom, and nobody knows what weight I am. You know, which would be, you know, sort of. I know I'm making a lot but I don't want anyone else knowing me weight. Thanks very much. Exactly. I don't want to be standing on weighing scales and saying to one of my kids, "What way am I there?" You know, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So
it's a good point. It's interesting just hearing all of those different elements of technology. If you were to kind of step back from that a little bit now and just, as opposed to the specifics of technology, if you were to describe the overall effect that using these pieces of accessible technology has had on your general life, how would you describe that effect?
It's just maintained my independence and kept me independent. It's, as I said, like, you know, I can read my own weight myself now. I can, you know, use the phone, you know, that way I don't have to be showing off and text to other people. So it's kept, like, I like my privacy, you know, I like my privacy even among my own family, let alone, you know, outsiders, you know. So it's kept me having me privacy at the level I want to have it, as opposed to having to have it, if that makes sense. It's also kept me on a par with my peers, and I'm talking about sighted peers, you know, my colleagues, my friends, you know, sort of. It's kept me on a pair. As I said, you know, there's one group of us that you know, we mainly we meet up every 3 or 4 months. We used to work together, but we mainly communicate via WhatsApp. And if I couldn't read texts, and some of them texts are for other people to read, if I couldn't read texts, I'd be completely out of that loop. So I'd be completely socially isolated from those, you know? So it's kept that sort of level. As I said, the JAWS on the computer and learning the ECDL and that, I was able to go off and do a postgrad. I wouldn't have been able to do that without, because when I first qualified as a physio in 1990, all of your work was sort of transcript, you know, is written up on a typewriter, you know. Whereas then by the time I went back to do my postgrad in 2008, everything was Dropbox, everything was emailed off, everything was, you know, research on Google Scholar and all of that. I wouldn't have been able to do that without the technology that's around, you know. So therefore my job prospects would have been limited. The other thing I was saying to you about earlier on was about Braille that I learned. I also learned typing when I was in Marion. Which is great, like, because I actually see colleagues and friends who still type with one finger, and I just to be looking at them going, oh my God, that's mad. The iPhone now, you can enable it to Braille, so you can use the screen as a Braille, as a screen away mode, and it's a Braille machine, so 6 dots for the Braille. So I used to dictate some of my texts, but the iPhone Siri couldn't really understand me loud accent, so sometimes it picks up funny things, say funny things, and then you listen back to the text and go, oh my God, sick, do it again. Whereas now I actually type out most of my stuff through Braille now, and I have it done in a matter of minutes, and you can do it discreetly with the Braille. I can have it sitting under the table and I can Braille away, sort of thing. And if I have, my earphone, sort of just one earphone in my ear, sort of, and I can Braille away to my heart's content. It's great,
Yeah, very good. So I'm just interested in one of the things you said earlier. You mentioned that if you were to give somebody advice, it would be to kind of start learning the technology before you absolutely have to depend on it, and that's a great piece of advice. Is there any other advice that you'd give somebody who's maybe coming to terms with sight loss? Maybe they've actually sort of had sight loss for a period of time, but maybe they're starting to get involved with technology now. Any particular advice that you'd give somebody who's starting off on that track?
Well, I'd say go off and get as much training as you can, sort of, like I'm revisiting the ECDL at the minute, sort of, so go off and get as much training as you can in it. Speak to others, get involved. There's peer groups around and there's technology groups around. Get involved with others to get information. Like I wouldn't have known about the Be My Eyes app, only I heard about it through the National Council for the Blind, sort of. Yeah. The other thing is as well is take advantage of the work adaptation grant. There is a work adaptation grant available. And we'd say, for instance, I have a Ruby XL Magnify, a little tiny, it's about 6 inches, 7 inches, that I use just to have a look at. We'd say like that if there was something written and to read it quickly or whatever. I wouldn't read a book with it now, that way, because again, I have to have it so big, that you lose sort of the fluidness of it. And it's easier to read. Audiobooks now, but I got that originally through the work adaptation grant, so again, you can, there are, if people don't have, we'd say, medical cards, or if they're working, sort of, and if they don't have sort of any feel they don't have entitlements, that's one that they can get in to help them in the workplace.
Yeah, very good. Well, there's some brilliant, very practical advice there, Katrina, and certainly really interesting to hear your experience and the variety of technology that you use in everyday life as well. We appreciate you talking to us today, Katrina.
That's great, Jude. Thanks very much.
Very good. So that was interesting to hear from Katrina, and particularly interesting just to hear how much technology has helped her, even though she was never particularly into technology. All the different parts of her life that technology has actually been some assistance to her. So we appreciate Katrina's comments there. That was good. Now, I think we have one or two questions that we're going to cover, so we'll invite Daniel to go through those.
We do indeed. Just to say that interview was lovely. Very well done to Katrina there. It's great hearing about her experiences, and likewise to Miriam earlier on. Two fantastic interviews today, Jude. Well done. Just in on the questions and answers panel, we've Laura who wrote into us asking, is iPhone 5 still getting updates? So I suppose with the iOS, which would be the main operating system, the whole software system for an iPhone, that's not coming to iPhone 5. Now there is iPhone 5S. I wonder, did she Is that meant to be iPhone 5 SE, Sean? Would you have an idea there?
I'm not sure. I know Laura sent that in there. I know the updates aren't going to the 5, so I'm not sure if it was a 5S that she meant. But
yeah,
Laura can email us at Labs. I know she sent us a message earlier on, so we can follow that up through the Labs email.
Okay.
It is a 6S and up that should be compatible with iOS 14. So she may consider upgrading as well if she has an older phone.
Yeah. Okay, and also we have in just I suppose something for the future that somebody's requesting just a chat on the compass on the iPhone and maybe the Suno band as well, if we could cover those at some stage coming up into the future. So yeah, we'll probably give those a little bit in time to come.
Yeah, very good. Great to get that feedback as well. Very good. So that's our questions and answers section for today, I think. So yeah, anytime you have feedback as well, we always love to hear the feedback. Things that you'd like to see featured. It gives us great ideas for the future. So just like that one there, we appreciate it when we get that feedback in. And actually, just something else to do with that feedback and any questions that you have. Before we go today, we just want to highlight a new feature that we're going to be covering on the show. We're going to be covering a kind of a tech help section each week. So it's a little bit like our question and answer section, but it doesn't have to be just tied to what you've heard on the show or any particular questions about what's on the show. You can email us in your IT issues and we'll address them live on our live event each week. But of course, for us to be able to answer your questions, you're going to need to be able to send them in to us. So if there's anything that you want covered, email us here at labs@ncbi.ie and just reference the live event in the email somewhere if you'd like it covered live on the show. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts or your questions or problems there. And
we'll include our paces, Jude, so it will.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, keep us on our toes. If you want to see us kept on our toes, I feel like you should nearly nominate somebody who should answer it, but I think that's maybe opening too much of an open goal there for people. So just send us through your problems and we'll sort them out, so long as they're technology based and accessibility based. Very good. So of course, that's not the only way that you get support from us. If you want to have any help with any of the things that you do here on our live events or other devices, any other technology questions as well, you can always get in touch with us on 1850 92 30 60 if you want to talk to us, or of course you can email us on labs@ncbi.ie, and for our wider NCBI services you can call 1850 33 43 53 or email info@ncbi.ie. Of course, if you'd like to make a donation to support our services, you can also visit donate.ncbi.ie. And if you'd like to sponsor one of our live events, you can do that as well by contacting labs@ncbi.ie. And that can help to keep our live events going. Now, just before we go, a quick reminder of what we're going to be talking about in some of our future live events. We're going to be talking about the Connect 12. Now, that's a great little unit for distance viewing as well as close-up magnification, ebooks, a whole lot more as well. We're going to be talking about that on, I think it's next week's show, but it's on one of our upcoming shows anyway. We'll be introducing NCBI Labs technology trainer Seamus Brett next week. In our Meet the Team section, we'll be fulfilling his lifelong dream to be part of the NCBI Labs live event. So we look forward to hearing from Seamus Brett next week. And later in the month, we're going to be having a look at NaviLens. It's an interesting twist on something similar to the QR codes that many people use. It's got that accessibility twist, if you like, on those codes. So that'll be interesting to see how that works. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about the Black Friday event that's popular every year, what sort of things you can keep your eye open for. Just a reminder that our next live event is on next week. Of course, we're running weekly at the moment, and we will be doing all the way through November as well. So next Tuesday, November 10th at 2:30 p.m. Of course, if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on our live events, as well as plenty more, you can subscribe to our newsletter as well. you can go to our website to subscribe to that, or you can just email us at labs@ncbi.ie if you'd like to do that. So all that's left for me to do today is to thank our panel again today, and our guests as well, of course, to everyone listening in as well. And we look forward to having you all back with us next week for another NCBI Labs live event.